Okay, for this next video what I'm going to take you through is the basis of designing computer games. Now I have a nice slide here pre-prepared for you. This is the main system structure that I use when I am designing a computer game. Anything with a dotted line around it is optional, and anything with a solid line is basically the desperate things that you need to make a game work properly. So starting right from the top where it says Game System Design, the first thing that can come up is obviously a splash screen. These are those very small windows that appear in the centre of your screen just when you double click on the program to start. Quite often you see them in Word and PowerPoint. You get them sometimes with games as well, and sometimes they show a whole load of copyright information that you might not be interested in, just as one full screen before the actual game loads. After this, it's quite often useful to have an introduction animation, an intro animation. This quite often is to set the scene for the entire game before you then get to the menu, but again isn't necessary at this stage. You could just have it go straight to the menu. From the menu, the absolute bare minimum you need is a new game option and an exit option, but you may also want to have a continue game if you're allowing for saved games in your game state, an options menu, and maybe even a high score table depending on what type of game it is. After starting a new game, you may want an intro animation just to set the scene for the start point before you then go into the main game itself. And as you can see from the game state, quite often you need to have a minimum of two items, the game over option and the game completed option. Whether you register the high score or not depends on if you're having high scores or not. And then going back to the menu, and then of course the menu, you can follow that back through to exiting the game. Simple and straightforward. So how do we do it? We don't pay any attention to that message first of all. Well, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new program in my solution, and I'm going to add a new project. I'm going to call this project Space Game. It's still a Windows Form application running .NET 4. And a very simple title for the game. Now the first thing I'm going to do, all these other items that I've got set up here on my solution are going to be removed from my tab screen. And to do that I just right click on the form that I've currently got open, which is this new program, and I'm going to close everything but this. So all the rest of the tabs are about to disappear. Simple as that. Next thing I'm going to do is go back to my Solution Explorer and set this one as the startup project, because obviously this is the one that I want to run when I hit the play button at the top. So how are we going to make this game work? Well, the first thing I'm going to show you how to do is view the code, stopping screen flicker. Generally, if you're making any sort of animation or any sort of graphics on a Windows Form based application, the screen will actually flicker as it moves from one to the other because of the way that Windows Form's designed. You can actually get around this issue by typing the following code. I'm afraid I've pre-prepared it because I didn't want to spend half the video drawing it. We need to tell the computer when this form resizes, redraw the screen. The user, as in me, as the programmer, is going to control what's painted on the screen. I want to paint using Windows Media Paint buffers, which is actually very useful. And as you can see, if true, it allows the window message reduces flicker. I'm also going to tell it to support the transparent back colour. That means I can actually use transparency in anything that I want to put on my form, which is quite a useful thing to do. Next, I'm going to create a new folder in my project. To do this, I add new folder. I'm going to call this Images. Now, I've already pre-prepared some images to go as my animation. So I'm going to add some existing items. You can prepare your images in Paint or anything else, as long as you've got them as PNGs, GIFs or JPEGs, any of those will be fine. I'm just going to find all my image files that I have, which are here, and I'm going to add those into my project. What they will do now is copy into this folder. Now when I build my program, I want all these files to be built and copied into the same folder as the exe file. So I'm going to highlight all of these files, go to the Properties window and change Copy to Output Directory to Copy if Newer. So if I make any changes to these files, those changes will copy across to the folder with the exe file in as well. But I need that to make sure that they copy across. Let's get on to actually making the game now, or making the animation first of all. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to change the text to space game, because that's what I'm going to make. I'm actually going to set the start position, but that's not going to matter too much, because I'm actually going to tell the computer to stretch the screen over the entire viewpoint of the window. I'm also going to get rid of my border. So now I have a screen which is actually going to take up the whole of my monitor and not have any border around it like a normal Windows program, just like most games do. Next thing I'm going to do on here is add a timer control. I just double click on the timer to bring that up. At the moment it's not enabled, which means it's not going to run, and that's fine for the first stage. I'm now going to go into my code and I'm going to start creating some items. First of all, I'm going to create a bitmap called visible view, and I'm going to create a 640 by 480 bitmap on the screen. So this is what's going to be drawn to for my animation. I'm then going to create a bitmap array and my animation is going to have 4 images. I'm then going to create an integer array, and again I'm going to need 4 timers. These are going to specify how long between each frame should it last, so I can change how long each screen appears for. After I've set up my style, I'm now going to put in all my images that I need to know. So my first image is actually in the images folder, so I use images, and it's called image1.png. I'm then going to copy and paste this 4 times to save time. 1, 2, 3. Note that arrays start with a 0, not with a 1. And I'm now going to put in the other images. All this does is load the file actually into memory into a bitmap object. I now need to do the same thing with my timers. And each one I'm going to have appear on the screen for 3 seconds, or 3000 milliseconds at the moment. I'm then going to start my timer off. So timer 1, I'm going to set it off and tell it after just 10 milliseconds fire its event, which is where it ticks, and enable it. So everything is all set up now, and it's now going to fire timer 1's on tick event. So if I double click on that, this is the piece of code that's going to run. Now what I'm going to do is create a graphics object to go alongside my visible view. And the initialization for this is to specify which image I'm actually going to do all my drawing to. And in this case, I'm going to draw to my visible view object, which you'll see why in a moment. When the timer ticks, what I'm going to do is, first of all, set the background of my form to a value that I'm going to store in a counter. So again, I actually need a counter at the top here as well, which is going to start at 0 because we want to start with the first image that's listed here. Okay. I'm then going to set timer 1 interval to whatever is set inside timers. I then move on to the next item in the list. If the counter becomes greater than the number of items that I have in my array, all I'm going to do is stop the timer at the moment. Finally, I'm going to create an event on my form 1 of click, and when I click the form, my application is going to exit. So my code is quite straightforward at the moment. At the moment I'm not using visible view or graphics. That's going to come later on. It will be used in the next recipe. I'm just going to use the images, timers and counter to draw whatever image I've currently got to the background of the form. I need to make sure the background of this form is stretched correctly. So what I'm going to do now is set my back colour to black, and I'm going to set my background image layout to zoom. If I use stretch, it will change the aspect ratio so things will look stretched too much left and right rather than up and down. If I use zoom, you'll have black lines down the left and right hand side because my laptop screen being widescreen. So now I'm going to run this program and see what happens. And you should see the animation, which is my start animation, each screen being 3 seconds. And to close the program, I just click on the form. This, of course, will then be changed in the next recipe, so that instead of just being an animation, that will then go through to our menu and ultimately to actually playing our game.